Hello, my name is Mohana Malapati, and today I will be presenting on insulin resistance. So first, a little background about myself. I'm a senior at South Forsyth High School, and I enjoy reading and playing the flute, as well as hiking and kayaking with my family. I'm interested in the field of global health and plan to pursue a career in medicine. I've done HOSA for the last 3 years, and this summer I got second place in my event medical reading at the International Leadership Conference. It was through this event that I got interested in this topic by reading the book Why We Get Sick by Dr. Benjamin Dickman. This book was fascinating, and I highly recommend reading it. It gave several vivid descriptions about how resistance to the vital hormone insulin is a significant factor, an underlying factor of various common illnesses and diseases. So first of all, insulin resistance, significance, and prevalence. According to the book Why We Get Sick, according to a recent study, up to 85% of Americans may have insulin resistance, and this statistic is common among other countries as well, worldwide. So throughout this presentation, I will first discuss what insulin is, and then what insulin resistance is and how it occurs, and how insulin resistance can be treated. First, let's start with this question here on how to identify insulin resistance. If you could please pause here and answer these questions, we can move on. So I got these questions directly from Why We Get Sick, and it's by answering these questions, you can determine the possibility of having insulin resistance. Answering yes to at least one question means you may have insulin resistance. Answering yes to 2 or more means there's a high likelihood you have insulin resistance. So it discusses illnesses such as obesity, having high blood pressure, heart disease, skin tags, which are all correlated with insulin resistance, as the book Why We Get Sick discusses. So first of all, what is insulin? Insulin is a vital hormone produced by the pancreas to regulate blood sugar. The CDC describes it as the key to let blood sugar into cells for use as energy, but insulin is much more than that. It's a very important hormone that affects every cell in the body. For example, it affects different cells based on the type of cell. So for liver cells, by binding to a liver cell, it results in the liver cell producing fat. Binding to a muscle cell results in the muscle cell producing proteins. So it's very significant. It's also an anabolic hormone, which means it creates bigger things from small things. So it's significant in increasing the size of cells as well. So what is insulin resistance? It's the underlying factor for hypertension, Alzheimer's, obesity, diabetes. So when you first think of insulin, what is the first thing you think of? It's usually diabetes 1 or 2. Insulin is much more than that, as discussed, and resistance to insulin is very significant and causes several diseases. In fact, Alzheimer's is also known as diabetes 3 because of its correlation to insulin resistance. So how does insulin resistance occur? According to the CDC, first, glucose overload in the bloodstream leads to the pancreas producing more insulin, which leads to a reduced response to insulin as a result of there being more. And then that results in the pancreas needing to produce more and more insulin in order to get the same response. The problem with this is the common way to test the common test used is the test for blood sugar or glucose. And the best way to identify insulin resistance would be through a test for insulin. As you can tell from a high measure of insulin, higher statistic for insulin, that there's a likelihood of insulin resistance. The problem is it's been common throughout history to associate high levels of glucose with insulin or with diabetes and other such illnesses, when instead it should be high levels of insulin which should be associated with these illnesses. However, there's no specific statistic for how high the insulin statistic would mean having insulin resistance. Whereas for diabetes or for blood glucose, having a statistic, the clinical values for blood glucose to determine having diabetes 1 or 2 is 126 milligrams per deciliter. There's no such statistic to determine insulin resistance with insulin. So as I was saying, the problem with this cycle of trying to maintain homeostasis with the glucose trying to be taken out of the bloodstream, or this positive feedback mechanism, it takes by the time you can catch that you have insulin resistance, it is likely that you already are showing symptoms of the illness is correlated with insulin resistance, because by the time you've determined you have insulin resistance, it's likely due to the high level of glucose, which is caused because the pancreas is not able to produce enough insulin to satisfy the need, the increased need for insulin due to the decreased insulin sensitivity of the cells. So the way the body becomes insulin resistant is when the majority of cells in the body become insulin resistant. Insulin resistance is one example I will go in detail with how resistance to insulin can cause hypertension, for example, is as insulin resistance is an anabolic hormone, it can cause the endothelium, which is the inner wall of the blood vessels, to grow and expand, grow. So that will cause the blood vessels to narrow, and this thickened blood vessel wall will cause higher blood pressure, which results in hypertension. So moving on to insulin resistance prevention and cure, the important thing is to make lifestyle changes such as exercising daily and eating a healthy diet. So exercising can improve insulin sensitivity, which is the reverse of insulin resistance. One reason it can is by doing the physical activity, your muscle contractions will end up taking in the glucose without the need for insulin to regulate the process. So additionally, eating a healthy diet is important. While throughout my research, several sources were contradicted on the topic of a diet, whether to eat high fat goods, low calorie, such as contradicted on topics such as these. However, one thing that remained common was recommended eating a low carbohydrate diet. And this is because reducing your carbohydrate intake will reduce the glucose overload in the bloodstream, which reduces the need for excess insulin, which will improve insulin sensitivity. So as mentioned before, insulin is typically not tested for. So the way your doctor may identify whether you have insulin resistance, the possibility of you having insulin resistance, will be through looking at high levels of blood sugar, triglycerides, low density lipoprotein cholesterol, and low levels of high density lipoprotein cholesterol. And then after being diagnosed with insulin resistance, cures include medications and surgery such as metformin, and then bariatric surgery. So with medications and surgery come many side effects. Metformin is a very effective medication recommended by the CDC for treating diabetes and to delay the onset of diabetes, but it also comes with its own side effects. However, as it directly improves insulin sensitivity, is one of the most effective. In addition, bariatric surgery, which removes weight, removes fat, also improves insulin resistance. So takeaways. Number one is to make lifestyle changes early on. So even if you seem healthy now, it's important to take precautionary measures and change your diet to be eating healthy and become physically active. Because as Benjamin Franklin once said, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. It's important to take precautionary measures now, so there's no need to have to try to cure a disease, spending more time, more money, trying to get your health back and have to deal with side effects later. Number three is to do your research. So even if you, whether you're diagnosed with insulin resistance or illness related with insulin resistance, such as diabetes or heart disease, or you're just a healthy individual, not even showing any symptoms, concerned about insulin resistance, it's important to understand this illness and how significant it can be. And then my references, I used the book Why We Get Sick by Dr. Benjamin Bickman, and I used the CDC website as well as the National Institute of Health websites. And I would like to acknowledge the Global Health Leadership Conference for giving me the opportunity to talk about insulin resistance. I would also like to acknowledge Dr. Benjamin Bickman's book, Why We Get Sick, which I already have several times throughout the presentation, because it gave me such an interest on this fascinating topic and introduced me to this topic. I'd also like to acknowledge HOSA and my event Medical Reading for introducing me to this topic. And I'd also like to thank my family and teachers for instilling a love of learning. Thank you.